Hello, my name is Anonymous. I am a super fan of your channel and I have a question for you. Why does the USA not have an official language? When I was in Europe, I traveled to a number of different countries and I noticed that almost all of them had an official language. And when I say official, I mean a language that is officially recognized by the government. A language that is used in government, in schools, in the courts and so on. And I thought to myself, well, if these countries can have an official language, why can't the United States? After all, English is spoken here more than any other language. About 80% of Americans speak English at home and it's the primary language in the majority of states. So why doesn't the USA have an official language? Well, there are actually two answers to that question. The first one is because of the Constitution. In Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, it says that the Congress shall establish a uniform rule of naturalization and such naturalization shall be uniform throughout the United States. In other words, the framers of the Constitution wanted to make sure that the rules for becoming a citizen would be the same in all states. And they also wanted to avoid the kind of linguistic and cultural conflicts that had arisen in Europe, where various ethnic groups were often forced to assimilate to the dominant culture. For example, when the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991, each of the 15 constituent republics had its own official language. But when they were all brought together in the European Union, that created a lot of tension, especially when it came to things like immigration policy and government funding. So the United States, with its long history of immigration and diversity, was very careful to avoid creating any language-based tensions. That's why there is no official language in the Constitution. But isn't English spoken more than any other language in the United States? Yes, but the framers couldn't have predicted that. At the time, there were many more languages spoken in the United States than there are today. And English wasn't necessarily the most common one. In fact, when the United States declared independence from Britain in 1776, only about 25% of the population spoke English as their primary language. German was actually the most common language spoken in the United States at the time. But as the United States grew and developed, so did the English language. And today, it is the most widely spoken language in the country. The second reason why the United States doesn't have an official language is because of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And this has led some people to argue that if the government were to establish a national language, that would violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. Now, this argument is a little bit controversial, but it makes sense to me because if the government is going to favor one language over another, that could potentially discriminate against people who speak other languages. And the First Amendment is all about protecting the freedom to speak and to worship in whatever way we choose. So those are the two main reasons why the United States doesn't have an official language, the Constitution and the First Amendment. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why doesn't the US just amend the Constitution to say that English is the national language? Well, that's not as easy as it sounds. Amending the Constitution is a very difficult process. It requires a 2/3 vote by Congress and then 3/4 of all state legislatures have to agree to it. And even if that happened, it still wouldn't solve the problem because then you'd have to figure out which version of English. Should the United States recognize British English, American English, Canadian English, Australian English? There are all kinds of different versions of the English language. So even if you amended the Constitution to say that English was the national language, you'd still have all kinds of different tensions and conflicts. So it's probably better that we just leave the question of language up to the states. Well, that's my question. Why doesn't the USA have an official language? If you like my explanation, please subscribe and leave a comment. And if you don't like it, that's okay, too. Just let me know why in the comments section below.